The silver moonlight spilled across the parched Nevada desert, as Olivia Jensen strained against the iron shackle that bit into her ankle, binding her to the weathered wagon wheel like an animal. Blood trickled down her dust-covered leg as the metal cut deeper with each desperate tug, but she refused to surrender to the pain or to the men who had placed her there to die. It was the summer of 1873, and Olivia had never imagined her 23rd year would end this way, abandoned by the ruthless band of outlaws who had abducted her from the stagecoach 3 days prior, after discovering she carried nothing of value. Too proud to release her and too callous to waste a bullet, they had instead chained her to their broken-down wagon and left her to the mercy of the elements, the desert scavengers, and whatever fate might befall a woman alone in the untamed West. Her once fine blue traveling dress hung in tatters around her slim frame, and her auburn hair fell in wild tangles over her shoulders. The water canteen they'd mockingly left just beyond her reach had been her torment throughout the scorching day. Now, as night descended and temperatures plummeted, Olivia felt her strength waning. Still, she yanked at the chain with renewed vigor, ignoring the fresh trails of blood that snaked down to stain the thirsty earth beneath her. "Someone will come," she whispered to herself, her voice cracked and dry. "Someone must come." As if conjured by her desperate plea, the distant thunder of hoofbeats reached her ears. Olivia went still, her heart pounding fiercely against her ribs. Friend or foe, either way, her fate would soon be decided. She squinted into the darkness, watching as a lone rider emerged from the shadows, his silhouette gradually taking form against the star-scattered sky. The man rode tall in his saddle, his broad shoulders squared beneath a well-worn duster. As he approached, Olivia could make out the weathered Stetson pulled low over his eyes and the glint of a rifle resting across his lap. He reined his horse to a stop several yards away, studying her with a wariness that spoke of hard-earned caution. "Miss." His voice was deep, carrying an edge that hinted at a life spent navigating the harsher realities of frontier existence. "Please," Olivia managed, her voice barely audible. "Help me." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots stirring up small clouds of dust as he approached. Up close, Olivia could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps no more than 28, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' growth of beard. His eyes, startlingly blue even in the dim light, assessed her situation with quick efficiency. "Name's Isaac Vance," he said, crouching down to examine the chain. "What in God's name happened here?" "Outlaws," Olivia replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "The Reeves gang. They took everything and left me to die." Isaac's expression hardened. "The Reeves gang doesn't leave survivors. They thought the desert would finish what they started." A bitter laugh escaped her cracked lips. "More sporting that way, I suppose." Without further comment, Isaac drew a knife from his boot and began working at the lock securing her shackle. His hands were those of a working man, calloused and strong, but they moved with surprising gentleness as he manipulated the blade. "I'm Olivia," she said, watching him work. "Olivia Jensen. I was traveling to Virginia City to meet my uncle." Isaac nodded but kept his focus on the lock. After several tense minutes, there was a satisfying click, and the iron fell away from her ankle. The sudden release sent a wave of pain through her leg as blood rushed to the abused limb. "Thank you," she whispered, tears of relief stinging her eyes. Isaac's gaze traveled up the empty trail before returning to Olivia's face. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "Frank Reeves isn't the type to leave loose ends. He's likely realized by now that leaving you alive was a mistake." Olivia's momentary relief vanished. "What do I do?" she asked, the reality of her situation crashing over her anew. Isaac studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he extended his hand. "Run with me," he said simply. Olivia stared at his outstretched hand, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Run where?" "I don't even know you. You don't know the Reeves gang either, but you know what they're capable of." Isaac's eyes held her steadily. "I'm heading north to Montana territory. There's nothing for me here anymore, and I reckon there's nothing for you either, not if you want to stay alive." "Montana," Olivia repeated, her mind racing. Virginia City and her uncle's promised protection now seemed impossibly distant. "I have no money, no possessions. Neither do I, save for my horse, my gun, and the clothes on my back." A faint smile touched Isaac's lips. "But I know how to survive out here, and I won't leave a woman to die alone in the desert." The distant howl of a coyote punctuated his words, a haunting reminder of the dangers that surrounded them. Olivia glanced down at her bloodied ankle, then back up at the man who had appeared like an apparition in her darkest hour. "Why would you help me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want in return?" Something like respect flickered in Isaac's eyes. "Not every man out here is looking to take something from you, Miss Jensen. Some of us still remember what it means to be human." He stood, offering his hand once more. "Dawn's not far off. We need to put distance between ourselves and this place before the sun rises. You can decide your path once you're safe, but right now you need to run." In that moment, Olivia realized she had only two choices: trust this stranger or await certain death. With a deep breath, she placed her hand in his. "Run with me," Isaac repeated, his grip firm and reassuring. "Yes," she said, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. "I will run with you." With careful movements, Isaac helped Olivia to her feet, steadying her as she swayed. The feeling returning to her abused ankle was excruciating, but she bit back her cry of pain. He guided her to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently nearby. "This is Samson," Isaac said, running a hand along the horse's neck. "He's carried me through worse than this." With gentle efficiency, he lifted Olivia onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her as he took the reins, his chest a solid presence against her back. Despite her exhaustion and fear, Olivia felt an unexpected sense of security in his embrace. "Hold tight," he instructed, and then they were moving, the horse's steady gait carrying them away from the abandoned wagon and into the vastness of the desert night. As they rode, Olivia leaned back against Isaac's chest, too weary to maintain her own posture. The rhythmic motion of the horse lulled her toward unconsciousness, but she fought against the encroaching darkness. "Who are you, Isaac Vance?" she murmured, her words nearly lost in the desert wind. There was a long pause before he answered, his voice low near her ear. "Just a man trying to outrun his past, same as anyone in these parts." "And what past is that? One I don't aim to revisit." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. "Rest now, Miss Jensen. We've got a long journey ahead." Olivia wanted to press further, to understand the man who had saved her life, but exhaustion overtook her at last. As she slipped into unconsciousness, her last thought was of the strange twist of fate that had delivered her from one unknown into another. When Olivia awoke, pale dawn light was filtering through a canopy of cottonwood trees. She lay on a bedroll near the remnants of a small fire, a worn leather duster draped over her like a blanket. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, then the previous night's events came rushing back. She sat up quickly, wincing as pain shot through her ankle. A quick examination revealed that someone had bandaged the wound while she slept. Looking around the small camp, she spotted Isaac crouched by a nearby stream, filling canteens. Samson grazed peacefully several yards away, tethered to a tree. "You're awake," Isaac observed, returning to the camp. He handed her a canteen. "Drink slowly. Your body needs to adjust." Olivia accepted the water gratefully, forcing herself to take small sips despite her desperate thirst. "How long was I unconscious?" "About 6 hours. We're north of Elko now, following the Humboldt River. There's a small settlement another day's ride from here where we can rest properly and get supplies." Olivia nodded, studying him in the clear morning light. Isaac Vance was handsome in a rugged, unrefined way, tall and broad-shouldered with features that spoke of hard living and resilience. The stubble on his jaw was darker than his sandy brown hair, which fell just long enough to curl at the nape of his neck. But it was his eyes that commanded attention, a clear, penetrating blue that seemed to take in everything and reveal nothing. "You tended to my ankle," she said, gesturing to the clean bandage. "It needed cleaning. Desert wounds fester quick." He busied himself extinguishing the last embers of their fire. "How does it feel?" "Painful, but better." Olivia attempted to stand, gritting her teeth against the discomfort. Isaac was at her side instantly, his strong arm supporting her elbow. "Easy now," he cautioned. "No need to rush it." "We can't afford to linger, can we?" Olivia met his gaze directly. "Not if the Reeves gang is looking for us." A flicker of approval crossed Isaac's face. "No, we can't, but killing yourself by pushing too hard won't help either." He guided her back down to the bedroll. "Eat something, then we'll move on." He handed her a small piece of jerky and a hard biscuit from his saddlebag. The food was plain, but to Olivia's famished body, it might as well have been a feast. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Jensen," Isaac said as he packed up their minimal camp. "What brings a woman like you out to these parts alone?" Olivia hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. "I wasn't always alone," she finally said. "I was traveling from Boston with my father. He died 2 weeks ago in Salt Lake City. Fever took him." The pain of speaking the words aloud was still raw. "My uncle in Virginia City is my only remaining family. I was continuing our journey to him when the stagecoach was attacked." Isaac paused in his work, studying her with unexpected compassion. "I'm sorry about your father." "Thank you." Olivia smoothed her tattered dress with trembling hands. "He was a good man, a professor of literature who dreamed of opening a school in the West. He believed education could tame the frontier." A wistful smile touched Isaac's lips. "A noble dream. And you?" Olivia asked, eager to shift the focus from her grief. "What drives a man to Montana Territory with nothing but his horse and gun?" Isaac resumed his packing, his movements economical and practiced. "Fresh start," he said simply. "The war took much from many of us. Some wounds don't heal in familiar places." The mention of the war, even a decade past, hung between them like a specter. Olivia studied him with new understanding, noting the way he favored his left side slightly, the faint scar that disappeared beneath his collar. "You fought for the Union," she observed. Isaac's hand stilled momentarily. "What makes you say that?" "My father supported the Union cause. I recognize the look in your eyes, the same haunted distance I saw in the soldiers who returned to Boston." "Your father taught you to observe people well." Isaac tied the last of their supplies to Samson's saddle. "Yes, I fought. Pennsylvania 83rd Infantry. But that's a lifetime ago now." Before Olivia could respond, Isaac tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. She followed his gaze to the tree line where nothing seemed amiss. "What is it?" she whispered, not sure. His voice had dropped to a low murmur. "But we're not alone." With swift efficiency, Isaac extinguished the last traces of their fire, erasing any sign of their presence. He helped Olivia to her feet and guided her toward Samson, his movements deliberate and silent. "When I lift you into the saddle, I want you to take the reins," he instructed quietly. If trouble comes, you ride north and don't look back. Follow the river until you reach the settlement." Fear clutched at Olivia's heart. "I won't leave you behind. This isn't a debate, Miss Jensen." His eyes held hers, unyielding. "Your life matters more than your pride right now." Before she could argue further, the distinctive crack of a rifle split the morning stillness. Isaac's reaction was instantaneous. He shoved Olivia to the ground and threw himself over her as a bullet splintered the bark of the tree behind them. "Damn it," he muttered, drawing his revolver. "They found us faster than I expected." "Vance," a voice called from the trees. "We know you're there. Hand over the woman and we might let you live." Olivia's blood ran cold. "How do they know your name?" Isaac's expression darkened. "Because I've crossed paths with the Reeves gang before." He repositioned himself, keeping his body between Olivia and the direction of the gunfire. "Stay down and stay quiet." He returned fire, his shots calculated and precise. A cry of pain from the trees confirmed at least one bullet had found its mark. "There are at least 3 of them," Isaac whispered. "When I give the signal, I need you to run for Samson and mount up. I'll cover you." "You can't face them alone," Olivia protested. "I'm not planning to die today." The fierce determination in his eyes silenced her objections. "Ready," she nodded, gathering her courage. "Now." Isaac surged to his feet, firing a rapid succession of shots toward their attackers. Olivia scrambled toward Samson, ignoring the searing pain in her ankle as she grabbed the saddle horn. With a strength born of desperation, she pulled herself up, clutching the reins with white-knuckled hands. Isaac backed toward her, maintaining covering fire. "Go," he shouted. "I'll catch up." But before Olivia could spur Samson forward, Isaac staggered, a red stain blossoming on his left shoulder. In that moment her decision was made. She extended her hand down to him. "Run with me," she echoed his words from the night before. Their eyes locked, and something passed between them, an understanding, a promise. With a grimace of pain, Isaac holstered his gun and gripped her outstretched hand. He swung up behind her just as another bullet whistled past them. Olivia dug her heels into Samson's flanks, and the loyal horse bolted forward, carrying them away from the ambush and deeper into the wilderness. They rode hard for hours, stopping only when Samson's labored breathing made it clear he could go no further without rest. By then, the sun hung high in the sky, beating down mercilessly on the parched landscape. Olivia helped Isaac dismount, alarmed by the pallor of his face and the blood that had soaked through his shirt. "We need to tend to your wound," she insisted, guiding him to the shade of a rocky outcropping. Isaac leaned heavily against the stone, his breathing shallow. "Just a graze," he muttered, though the evidence suggested otherwise. Olivia tore a strip from her already tattered petticoat and reached for the canteen. "Remove your shirt," she instructed, adopting the firm tone her father had used with difficult patients when he'd volunteered at the hospital during the war. To her surprise, Isaac complied without argument, wincing as he peeled the bloodied fabric away from his skin. The bullet had torn through the flesh of his shoulder, but fortunately hadn't lodged in the muscle. Still, the wound was serious enough to require proper treatment. Olivia worked methodically, cleaning the injury with water and binding it as best she could with her makeshift bandages. As she worked, she couldn't help but notice the map of old scars that crisscrossed his torso, testament to a life of hardship and conflict. "You're good at this," Isaac observed, watching her deft movements through pain-narrowed eyes. "My father believed a woman should be educated in all practical matters, including basic medicine." Olivia secured the bandage with a tight knot. "He would say knowledge was never wasted, especially on the frontier." "Wise man, your father." "Yes, he was." Olivia sat back on her heels, surveying her handiwork. The bleeding has slowed, but you need proper medical attention. Is there a doctor in the settlement you mentioned? Isaac nodded. Old Doc Williams. Patched me up before. He's a drunk, but his hands are steady when it matters. Olivia helped him back into his shirt, trying to ignore the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. How did you know the Reeves gang? She asked quietly, the question that had been burning in her mind since the ambush. Isaac was silent for so long that Olivia thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tinged with bitterness. I was a deputy marshal in Nevada Territory for 3 years after the war. Frank Reeves and his brothers were my last case before I turned in my badge. He closed his eyes briefly, as if the memory itself caused him pain. They'd been terrorizing settlements along the Nevada-Idaho border. Robbery, extortion, murder. They left a trail of bodies and broken lives wherever they went. You caught them. A humorless laugh escaped his lips. I caught the youngest brother, Matthew. Tracked him for weeks and finally brought him in. He was to stand trial in Carson City. Isaac's hand clenched into a fist. Frank and the others ambushed the prison wagon, killed 2 good men friends of mine. Matthew escaped with them. Understanding dawned on Olivia's face. And now they recognized you. Frank Reeves doesn't forget a face, especially one that cost him as much trouble as mine did. Isaac's eyes found hers, his gaze intense. I'm sorry, Miss Jensen. I've put you in more danger by being with you. No, Olivia said firmly. You saved my life. If you hadn't found me, I would have died chained to that wagon. And if I hadn't been a former lawman with a history of hunting the Reeves gang, they might not be hunting us so determinedly now. Olivia considered this, then lifted her chin defiantly. It doesn't matter. We're in this together now. Something like admiration flickered in Isaac's eyes. You're not what I expected, Olivia Jensen. Neither are you, Isaac Vance. She rose to her feet, extending her hand to help him up. Now we should move on while we still have daylight. Can you ride? Isaac grasped her hand, his grip firm despite his injury. I've ridden with worse. They continued northward, following the winding path of the Humboldt River. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as they traveled, offering better opportunities to hide their trail, but making the journey more challenging for horse and riders alike. They took turns at the reins, Isaac teaching Olivia to guide Samson through the difficult passes. By the time dusk fell, they had reached the foothills of a small mountain range. Isaac directed them to a sheltered cave he seemed familiar with, confirming Olivia's suspicion that he knew this territory well. We'll rest here tonight, he said, helping her dismount. The entrance is hidden from the main trail, and there's a freshwater spring inside. The cave was cool and surprisingly spacious, its walls smooth from centuries of water erosion. True to Isaac's word, a small spring bubbled from the rock at the rear, providing clear, cold water. Olivia helped Isaac unsaddle Samson and arrange their meager supplies while he built a small fire near the cave entrance, where the smoke would dissipate through natural fissures in the rock ceiling. You've been here before, Olivia observed as she settled near the fire's warmth. Isaac nodded, carefully adjusting his injured shoulder. This was one of my hideouts during my martial days. Good place to hole up when tracking outlaws through the territory. You must have been a good marshal. I was effective, he corrected, a shadow passing over his features. Not always good. Olivia studied him across the flickering flames, sensing there was more to his story than he was sharing. Why did you stop? Being a marshal, I mean. Isaac's gaze remained fixed on the fire. Lost my taste for hunting men, he said simply. Started to feel like I was becoming what I was chasing. The confession hung between them, honest and unadorned. Olivia sensed it was more truth than Isaac Vance typically offered, and she honored it with a moment of silence. "What awaits you in Montana?" she asked eventually. "Land," he replied. "The government's offering homestead plots to settlers willing to work them. Figure, I've spent enough years taking lives, might be time to try growing something instead." The image of Isaac as a farmer tending crops rather than tracking criminals brought an unexpected smile to Olivia's lips. "I can see that," she said softly. "My father would say it's a noble pursuit, cultivating the earth. And you?" Isaac's blue eyes found hers across the fire. "What waits for you in Virginia City beyond your uncle?" Olivia hesitated, suddenly unsure. Before her father's death, the answer would have been simple. She would help him establish his school, perhaps teach alongside him. Now the future stretched before her, unmarked and unknown. "I don't know," she admitted. "My father and I had plans, dreams, really, without him." She trailed off, the wound of his loss still fresh. "What were they?" Isaac asked, his voice gentler than she'd heard it before. "These dreams." A school where anyone could learn, regardless of background or circumstance, where knowledge wasn't just for the wealthy or privileged. Olivia's voice grew stronger as she spoke, her father's passion echoing in her words. "My father believed education was the key to a more civilized West, that books and ideas could accomplish what guns and laws couldn't. He sounds like a remarkable man." He was. Olivia blinked back unexpected tears. "I miss him terribly." Isaac reached across the space between them, his calloused fingers briefly touching her hand. "His dream doesn't have to die with him." The simple touch and the earnest words pierced something in Olivia's heart. For the first time since her father's passing, she felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that his legacy could live on through her. "Thank you," she whispered. They fell into companionable silence. The crackling fire and the soft sounds of Samson's occasional movements, the only disruption to the quiet of the cave. Olivia found herself studying Isaac as he tended the flames, noting the careful precision of his movements despite his injury, the thoughtful set of his jaw, the way the firelight caught in his eyes. "You should rest," he said, catching her gaze. "Tomorrow will be a long day. What about you?" She countered, nodding toward his wounded shoulder. "I'll keep watch for a while." His hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his side. The Reeves gang isn't known for giving up easily. Olivia wanted to protest, but recognized the wisdom in his caution. She settled onto the bedroll he'd prepared for her, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and the tattered state of her once fine clothing. "Isaac," she murmured, already feeling sleep tugging at her consciousness. "Yes. Why did you help me, truly?" There was a long pause before he answered, his voice low and reflective. "Because there was a time when I wouldn't have. When I would have ridden past, telling myself someone else's trouble wasn't my concern." He poked at the fire, sending sparks dancing upward. "I'm trying to be a different man than I was." The raw honesty of his answer followed Olivia into sleep, wrapping around her like a blanket more substantial than the thin covering that shielded her from the cave's chill. She dreamed of wide, open spaces and endless skies, of a small house with a garden bursting with life, and of a pair of clear blue eyes watching over her. When she woke hours later, it was to find Isaac slumped against the cave wall, finally surrendered to exhaustion, his hand still resting on his weapon. Moving quietly so as not to disturb him, Olivia took her turn at watch, studying the stars visible through the cave entrance and wondering what the coming day would bring. Dawn broke clear and cold, the first pale light of morning filtering into the cave and illuminating Isaac's sleeping form. Olivia had maintained her vigilant watch through the remainder of the night, finding unexpected peace in the solitude and the rhythmic sound of Isaac's breathing. She had used the quiet hours to take inventory of their situation. Their supplies were meager: some jerky, hardtack, a few strips of dried fruit, and less than half a canteen of water. Her ankle, while still tender, had improved significantly, but Isaac's shoulder wound concerned her. Though her makeshift bandage had stemmed the bleeding, infection remained a serious risk without proper treatment. As if sensing her scrutiny, Isaac stirred, his hand instinctively tightening on his revolver before his eyes opened. He took in the situation with a quick glance, immediately noting that Olivia had taken over the watch. "You should have woken me," he said, sitting up with a barely suppressed wince. "You needed the rest." Olivia moved to his side, kneeling to examine his bandaged shoulder. "How does it feel?" "I've had worse," he deflected, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed his discomfort. "We should get moving. The settlement is still a good day's ride from here." Olivia frowned, gently probing the area around the wound. "You're running a fever," she observed, her fingers detecting the unnatural heat of his skin. "The wound may be infected. All the more reason to reach Doc Williams quickly." Isaac rose to his feet, swaying slightly before steadying himself against the cave wall. "We can't afford to linger here." Though concerned, Olivia recognized the determination in his stance. They broke camp efficiently, Isaac teaching her the proper way to secure their supplies and saddle Samson. His instructions were clear and patient, never condescending despite her city upbringing and unfamiliarity with frontier life. "You're a good teacher," Olivia remarked as she tightened the cinch as he'd shown her. A ghost of a smile touched Isaac's lips. "Never thought of myself that way. But I suppose we all have something to share, if someone's willing to learn." They emerged from the cave into the crisp morning air, the valley below them shrouded in a blanket of mist that would soon burn away under the rising sun. Isaac insisted on helping Olivia mount first despite his injury, then swung up behind her with a stifled grunt of pain. "Stay on the game trails," he instructed as she took the reins. "They're harder to follow than the main paths." Olivia guided Samson down the hillside with newfound confidence, following Isaac's occasional directions. They kept to the shadows of trees where possible, crossing streams to break their trail, and always keeping alert for signs of pursuit. Though they saw no evidence of the Reeves gang, the knowledge of their hunters kept them vigilant. As the day progressed, Isaac's condition deteriorated noticeably. His body grew hotter against Olivia's back, and his breathing became more labored. By midday, he was leaning heavily against her, his directions coming in increasingly infrequent and disjointed fragments. "Isaac," she said finally, bringing Samson to a halt beside a small creek. "You need rest and water. Keep going," he mumbled, his voice thick with fever. "Not safe to stop." "You'll fall from the saddle if we continue like this," Olivia insisted, dismounting and helping him down after her. He swayed dangerously, and she guided him to sit beneath a cottonwood tree. "Just for a few minutes, to cool your fever." Too weak to argue, Isaac submitted to her ministrations as she bathed his face and neck with cool water from the creek. When she unwrapped his bandage to examine the wound, her heart sank. The edges were angry and inflamed, with telltale red streaks beginning to extend outward from the injury. "It's worse than I thought," she said softly, more to herself than to him. Isaac's eyes, bright with fever, focused on her face. "You should go on without me," he said with surprising clarity. "Take Samson and ride for the settlement. Get help." "I'm not leaving you," Olivia replied firmly, echoing his own words from their first meeting. "Olivia." He caught her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong despite his weakened state. "The Reeves gang will show no mercy if they find us. You have a chance alone." She met his gaze steadily. "And you saved my life at great risk to your own. I won't abandon you now." She softened her tone. Besides, I wouldn't know which way to go without you. A pained smile touched his lips. Stubborn woman. Yes, well, my father always said I inherited my mother's determination. She finished applying a fresh bandage, then helped him drink from the canteen. Rest a moment longer, then we'll continue. The sooner we reach this settlement of yours, the better. They remained by the creek for nearly an hour, Olivia constantly checking for signs of pursuit while tending to Isaac and Samson. When they finally resumed their journey, she positioned Isaac in front of her this time, supporting his weight against her chest as she guided the horse with arms encircling his waist. The terrain gradually changed as they traveled, the arid landscape giving way to more abundant vegetation and rolling hills. Late in the afternoon, they crested a rise to find a small valley spread before them, a cluster of wooden buildings nestled along a bend in the river. Riverton, Isaac murmured, his first coherent word in hours. Made it. Relief flooded through Olivia at the sight of civilization, however modest. The settlement consisted of perhaps 24 structures, a main street with a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and various other establishments, surrounded by scattered cabins and small homesteads. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and figures moved about on the single dirt road that served as the town's center. "Where do we find the doctor?" Olivia asked, guiding Samson down the slope toward the settlement. "End of town," Isaac replied, his voice weak but determined. "Cabin with green door." As they approached the outskirts of Riverton, curious eyes turned their way. Olivia was acutely aware of the picture. They presented a woman in tattered clothing supporting a wounded man, both of them dust-covered and exhausted. Still, she kept her chin high and her focus on reaching the doctor's cabin. They were halfway down the main street when a burly man emerged from the saloon, his hand moving to the gun at his hip as he stepped into their path. "Hold up there," he called, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of a lawman. The badge on his chest confirmed it, the local sheriff. "State your business in Riverton." Olivia reined Samson to a stop, her heart pounding. "Please, sir, my companion is injured and needs medical attention." "We're looking for Dr. Williams." The sheriff's eyes narrowed as he took in the pair before him, his gaze lingering on Isaac's slumped form. Recognition dawned in his weathered face. "Vance, Isaac Vance," he approached cautiously. "Thought you'd left these parts for good." Isaac raised his head with visible effort. "Sheriff Callahan, still wearing that badge, I see." The older man's expression softened slightly. "Someone's got to keep the peace." He glanced at Olivia, then back to Isaac's wounded shoulder. "Trouble seems to follow you like a shadow, Vance." "Not by choice," Isaac managed. "The lady is Olivia Jensen. She's under my protection." Callahan studied Olivia with newfound interest. "That's so. Well, Miss Jensen, you've fallen in with a complicated man." He stepped aside, gesturing down the street. "Doc's where he always is, probably sleeping off last night's whiskey. I'll send for him." "Thank you, Sheriff," Olivia said with genuine gratitude. As Callahan moved away, Isaac leaned back against her, his voice barely audible. "Sheriff's a good man. Trust him if things go wrong." "Nothing is going wrong," Olivia insisted, spurring Samson forward. "You're going to be fine." The doctor's cabin was exactly as Isaac had described, a modest structure at the edge of town with a faded green door. Before Olivia could even dismount, the door swung open to reveal a disheveled older man with a shock of white hair and spectacles perched on his nose. "Bring him inside," Doc Williams ordered without preamble, his bloodshot eyes taking in the situation with professional assessment, despite the lingering effects of alcohol evident in his flushed face. "Quickly now." With the doctor's help, Olivia managed to get Isaac off the horse and into the cabin. They laid him on a narrow examination table, where Williams immediately began cutting away the bandage to expose the wound. "Gunshot?" he asked, not looking up from his work. "Yes," Olivia confirmed. "2 days ago now," Williams grunted, probing the inflamed flesh with practiced fingers. Isaac remained conscious but barely responsive, his eyes glazed with fever. "Infection's set in good," the doctor announced grimly. "Going to have to clean it proper and drain it." He glanced at Olivia. "Not pretty work, miss. Sheriff can escort you to the boarding house while I tend to him." "I'm staying," Olivia said firmly, meeting the older man's surprised gaze. "I've assisted with medical procedures before. My father was a professor who volunteered in field hospitals during the war." Williams studied her for a moment, then nodded with grudging respect. "Wash up then. There's water in the basin. I'll need you to hold him down. This is going to hurt like hellfire, and I don't have enough laudanum to put him under completely." The next 2 hours were among the most harrowing of Olivia's life. Williams worked methodically, first administering what little laudanum he had, then cutting open the infected wound to drain the poisonous fluids. Isaac thrashed against the pain despite the opiate, requiring both Olivia's and the sheriff's strength to keep him still enough for the doctor to work. Throughout the ordeal, Olivia spoke softly to Isaac, her words a continuous flow of reassurance and comfort. Whether he heard her or not, she couldn't tell, but the act of speaking helped steady her own nerves as she watched Williams probe the wound for fragments, flush it with a pungent antiseptic solution, and finally stitch it closed with neat, precise sutures. "He's strong," Williams commented as he applied a clean bandage. "Most men would have passed out from the pain alone." "Will he recover?" Olivia asked, her voice hoarse from the strain of the past hours. The doctor washed his hands in a basin of reddened water. "If the fever breaks within the next day, yes. If not—" He shrugged, the gesture containing all the fatalism of a frontier physician who had seen too many men die despite his best efforts. "He'll fight," Olivia said with conviction. "He's not a man who surrenders easily." Williams regarded her with curious eyes. "You know him well." "No," she admitted, realizing the truth of it even as she spoke. "But I know enough." The doctor nodded, then gestured to a rocking chair in the corner of the room. "You can sit with him if you want. I'll be next door if the fever worsens, or he shows signs of bleeding again." After Williams left, Sheriff Callahan lingered, studying Olivia with open curiosity. "Mind telling me how you and Vance came to be traveling together, Miss Jensen, and why someone put a bullet in him?" Olivia hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Isaac clearly knew this man, but trust came difficult after her recent experiences. "The Reeves gang," she finally said, deciding that the truth, or at least part of it, was necessary. "They abducted me from a stagecoach, then left me to die in the desert. Isaac saved me. The gang has been hunting us since." Callahan's expression darkened at the mention of the outlaws. "Frank Reeves has a special hatred for Vance. Been that way since Isaac brought in his brother 3 years back." He sighed heavily. "If they tracked you this far, they won't stop at the town limits." "What can we do?" The sheriff adjusted his gun belt thoughtfully. "Riverton's a peaceful settlement most days, but we can defend our own when needed. I'll put the word out, have men watching the approaches to town." He fixed Olivia with a steady gaze. "But you two can't stay long. Your presence puts everyone at risk." "I understand," Olivia said quietly. "Once Isaac is able to travel, we'll move on." Callahan nodded, apparently satisfied. "Get some rest, Miss Jensen. You look dead on your feet." He moved to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Isaac Vance is a good man, one of the best lawmen I ever knew before whatever happened that made him turn in his badge." After the sheriff departed, Olivia moved the rocking chair to Isaac's bedside and settled in for her vigil. His face was flushed with fever, his breathing shallow and rapid. She dipped a cloth in cool water and bathed his forehead, speaking to him softly though she doubted he could hear. "You have to fight this, Isaac," she murmured, her fingers gently brushing damp hair from his brow. "I can't run with you if you're not beside me." As night fell over the small settlement, Olivia continued her watch, dozing occasionally only to jerk awake at any change in Isaac's breathing. Sometime in the darkest hours, his fever seemed to peak, his body alternately burning with heat and shaking with chills. Olivia maintained her ministrations faithfully, replacing cool compresses and offering tiny sips of water when he seemed capable of swallowing. Near dawn, Isaac's fever broke at last. Olivia, exhausted beyond measure, felt tears of relief spring to her eyes as his breathing steadied and the unnatural flush began to fade from his skin. When she placed her hand on his forehead, it was cool and slightly damp rather than burning hot. "Thank God," she whispered, allowing herself to slump back in the chair, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. She was awakened sometime later by the gentle pressure of fingers against her hand. Opening her eyes, she found Isaac watching her, his gaze clear and lucid for the first time in over a day. "Olivia," he said, his voice a rasp but recognizable. She leaned forward, her fatigue forgotten in the rush of relief. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo," he admitted with the ghost of a smile, "but alive, thanks to you." "Dr. Williams did the real work," Olivia demurred, though warmth spread through her at his recognition. "You didn't leave me." Isaac's gaze held hers, intense despite his weakness. "You could have, should have maybe, but you didn't." "I told you before," she said softly, "we're in this together now." Something shifted in Isaac's expression, a softening, a vulnerability he hadn't allowed himself to show before. Before he could respond, however, the door opened to admit Doc Williams, looking considerably more presentable than he had the previous evening. "Well now," he said, noting Isaac's conscious state with professional satisfaction. "Seems you decided to stay in the land of the living after all, Vance." Isaac's lips quirked in a weak smile. "Spite's a powerful motivator, Doc." Williams chuckled as he examined the wound, nodding with approval at what he found. "Infection's retreating. You're not out of the woods yet, but I'd say you've rounded the worst bend in the trail." He glanced at Olivia, taking in her exhausted appearance. "You, Miss Jensen, need proper rest and a meal that isn't hardtack. Mrs. Porter at the boarding house has a room ready for you." "I'd prefer to stay," Olivia began. "Doctor's orders," Williams interrupted firmly. "You'll do your friend no good if you collapse from exhaustion. He's stable now and I'll keep watch." Though reluctant, Olivia recognized the wisdom in his words. She squeezed Isaac's hand gently. "I'll return soon," she promised. "Go," he urged, his voice stronger than before. "Rest. You've earned it." Stepping outside into the bright morning light, Olivia was momentarily disoriented by the normality of the scene before her. Children played in the dusty street, women hung laundry on lines stretched between cabins, and men went about their business with the unhurried pace of small-town life. After days of desperate flight, the mundane activities of Riverton seemed almost surreal. She made her way to the boarding house, where Mrs. Porter, a robust widow with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner, showed her to a small but clean room and promised hot water for bathing would be brought up shortly. "Sheriff Callahan explained some of your situation," the older woman said, her keen gaze taking in Olivia's tattered dress and disheveled appearance. "I've laid out some clothing that might fit you belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to Oregon." "That's very kind," Olivia said, touched by the unexpected generosity. "I can pay," Mrs. Porter waved away her offer. "Any woman who stands by her man through gunshots and fever has earned a clean dress in my book. Besides," she added with a wink, "Isaac Vance saved my youngest grandson from drowning in the river 2 summers ago. Consider it repayment of a debt." After the widow departed, Olivia sank onto the narrow bed, overwhelmed by the events of the past few days and the kindness of strangers. For the first time since her father's death, she allowed herself to truly weep for her loss, for the trauma she had endured, and for the unexpected connection she had formed with a wounded former lawman whose past remained largely a mystery to her. The hot bath that followed was a luxury beyond measure, washing away days of dust, blood, and fear. The borrowed dress, a simple blue calico that had clearly been well loved, fit well enough to be decent, if a bit loose around the waist. With her hair washed and combed and wearing clean clothes, Olivia felt almost human again as she made her way downstairs to the boarding house dining room. Mrs. Porter served her a hearty meal of venison stew, fresh bread, and apple pie, insisting she eat every bite. "You're too thin by half," the widow declared. "Can't expect to outrun outlaws on an empty stomach." "Is that what everyone in town is saying?" Olivia asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Small towns run on gossip like engines run on coal," Mrs. Porter replied pragmatically. "But don't you worry, folks here respect Isaac, despite his mysterious ways, and they despise the Reeves gang. You'll find no sympathy for those devils in Riverton." Fortified by food and the widow's reassurances, Olivia returned to the doctor's cabin in the afternoon to find Isaac sitting propped up against pillows, looking remarkably improved despite the bandages visible beneath his clean shirt. "You look like a different woman," he observed, his eyes warming as they took her in. "I feel like one," Olivia admitted, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Mrs. Porter has been extraordinarily kind." "Agatha Porter is a force of nature," Isaac agreed with a small smile. "Her husband and I rode together for a time before he passed. She mentioned you saved her grandson." Isaac shrugged his good shoulder dismissively. "Right place, right time. Boy couldn't swim. River was high that spring." His eyes studied her face with unexpected intensity. "You've been crying." Olivia was startled by his perception. "It's been an overwhelming few days." "Yes," he agreed quietly. "For both of us." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Doc Williams bustled in with fresh bandages and a stern lecture about Isaac not overexerting himself. "Another day of rest," the doctor pronounced after changing the dressing, "then light activity only. That shoulder needs time to heal properly." "We may not have that luxury," Isaac replied, his expression grave. "Sheriff Callahan tells me there have been reports of strangers asking about us in settlements to the south." Williams frowned. "The Reeves gang doesn't typically venture this far north." "They do, when they're hunting someone specific," Isaac said grimly. "And they won't stop until they find us or until we're far beyond their reach." "Montana," Olivia said, remembering their earlier conversations. "Your homestead claim." Isaac nodded. "It's still our best option. Once I'm strong enough to travel, we head north. The territorial border is 3 days' hard ride from here. Frank Reeves is bold, but even he won't risk crossing into Montana territory with the warrants out for him there." 3 days, Olivia repeated, trying to imagine another desperate flight across the wilderness. "Can you manage it?" "I'll have to," Isaac said simply, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering determination. "We both will." Over the next 2 days, Olivia divided her time between the boarding house, where Mrs. Porter insisted on teaching her practical frontier skills like darning and basic cooking, and the doctor's cabin, where Isaac gained strength with remarkable speed. The townspeople of Riverton proved surprisingly welcoming, offering small kindnesses despite the potential danger her and Isaac's presence brought to their community. Sheriff Callahan maintained vigilant patrols around the settlement's perimeter, organizing the able-bodied men into watches that kept constant guard on the approaches to town. The atmosphere was tense, but resolute Riverton would not surrender visitors to the mercies of the Reeves gang without a fight. On the third morning, Isaac was deemed fit enough to leave the doctor's care. Though still weak and with his arm in a sling, he insisted on making preparations for their departure the following day. Olivia accompanied him to the general store, where the proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, helped them assemble supplies for the journey north. "Montana's beautiful country," Jenkins commented as he packed dried goods into saddlebags. "Harsh winters, but the summers make up for it. Good land for those willing to work it." "That's what I'm counting on," Isaac replied, carefully examining a map spread across the counter. "We'll follow the eastern route through the high country, longer but less traveled." Olivia watched as Isaac traced their planned journey with his finger, noting the confidence in his movements despite his injury. "Will we pass any settlements?" she asked, concerned about his still healing wound. "Small trading post here," he indicated a spot on the map, "and a mining camp about halfway. Beyond that, it's wilderness until we reach the territorial border." As they continued their preparations, Sheriff Callahan entered the store, his expression grave. "Vance," he said without preamble, riders approaching from the south. 4 men, armed. "My spotter says one matches Frank Reeves' description." The store fell silent, all eyes turning to Isaac and Olivia. Isaac's face hardened, his hand instinctively moving to his revolver. "How far out?" he asked, his voice calm despite the danger. "An hour, maybe less," Callahan replied. "They're moving cautiously like they're scouting." Isaac turned to Olivia, his blue eyes intense. "We need to leave now, no time to wait until morning." "I'll help you saddle Sampson," Jenkins offered immediately, already gathering their supplies. "My boy can run ahead to the stable." "And I've got men positioning themselves along Main Street," Callahan added. "We'll buy you time to slip out the North Trail." Olivia felt a surge of gratitude for these people who had known her less than a week yet were risking themselves to aid their escape. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you." Within half an hour they were ready to depart. Sampson stood patiently at the rear of the general store, laden with supplies. Mrs. Porter had arrived with extra clothing, warm blankets, and food for their journey, tucking the items into their saddlebags with motherly efficiency. "You take care of each other," she instructed, pressing a small packet into Olivia's hand. "Medicinal herbs," she explained, "for his shoulder if the wound troubles him." "I don't know how to thank you," Olivia said, impulsively embracing the older woman. Mrs. Porter patted her back. "Live well, child. That's thanks enough." Isaac, his face drawn with the strain of hasty preparation despite his injury, clasped hands with Sheriff Callahan and Doc Williams. "I owe you both," he said simply. "Consider it payment for services rendered when you wore the badge," Callahan replied. "Now go, before those bastards get any closer." With the sheriff's help, Isaac mounted Sampson, then extended his hand down to Olivia. Their eyes met in a moment of silent communication, acknowledgement of the danger ahead and the bond that had formed between them. "Run with me," Isaac said softly, echoing the words that had changed both their lives days earlier. Olivia took his hand without hesitation, allowing him to pull her up behind him. "Always," she replied, her arms encircling his waist with careful attention to his injured shoulder. They departed Riverton by the North Trail, riding at a steady pace that wouldn't overtax Isaac's strength or Samson's endurance. Behind them, the small settlement prepared to delay the Reeves gang, buying precious time for their escape with the courage of ordinary people standing against tyranny. As the wilderness closed around them once more, Olivia rested her cheek against Isaac's back, drawing comfort from his solid presence despite the uncertainties that lay ahead. They were fugitives still, hunted and vulnerable, but no longer alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The first day of their journey northward passed without incident, though Isaac's strength began to flag as evening approached. They made camp in a sheltered hollow beside a small stream, nestled among pines that provided both concealment and firewood. Olivia insisted on handling the majority of the camp preparations, allowing Isaac to rest his injured shoulder. "You're becoming quite the frontierswoman," he observed as she efficiently constructed a small fire pit and gathered kindling. Olivia smiled, pleased by his approval despite herself. "Necessity is an excellent teacher," she replied, striking a match to the arranged tinder. "Though I must credit Mrs. Porter for some practical instruction. Agatha always did have a knack for recognizing potential." Isaac leaned back against his saddle, watching her with thoughtful eyes. "You adapt quickly. It's a valuable trait out here. My father used to say that flexibility of mind was the true mark of an educated person." Olivia busied herself preparing a simple meal from their provisions, trying not to dwell on thoughts of her father and the life she had lost. "He believed that books were important, but experience was the true teacher. He sounds wiser by the day, your father." Isaac accepted the tin cup of coffee she offered, their fingers brushing momentarily in the exchange. "I'm sorry you lost him." "So am I," Olivia said softly. "But I'm beginning to think he would approve of this journey, unexpected as it is. He always encouraged me to see beyond the confines of Boston society." They ate their modest supper in companionable silence, the fire casting dancing shadows across their small camp. As darkness settled fully around them, Isaac insisted on taking the first watch despite Olivia's protests. "You need to heal," she argued, noting the lines of fatigue around his eyes. "And you need to rest," he countered firmly. "I'll wake you in a few hours." "Don't worry, I won't push myself beyond what's necessary." Reluctantly, Olivia settled onto the bedroll, wrapping herself in the blankets Mrs. Porter had provided. The night was cool, the stars brilliant overhead through gaps in the pine branches. She watched Isaac's profile silhouetted against the dying fire, struck by how familiar he had become to her in such a short time. "Isaac," she said quietly, "may I ask you something personal?" He turned toward her, his expression open. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Fair enough." Olivia propped herself up on one elbow. "What made you turn in your marshal's badge? The real reason, not the simplified version you gave before." Isaac was silent for so long that Olivia thought he might have decided not to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and reflective. "I killed a man," he said simply. "Not the first, the job required it sometimes, but this one was different." He poked at the embers with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. He was young, barely 20, rode with a gang of horse thieves operating out of Utah territory. "We cornered them near the Nevada border after a month-long chase." Isaac paused, his eyes fixed on the fire but seeing something far away. "The others surrendered when they realized they were outmatched. This boy Jamie was his name. He pulled a gun. I shot him." His voice grew quieter. "Afterward, we found a letter in his pocket from his mother. He'd been sending money home to his family's farm in Kansas. Drought had nearly ruined them. In his mind, he was saving them the only way he knew how." "That's a tragic story," Olivia said softly, "but it doesn't make you responsible for his choices." No, Isaac agreed, but it made me question mine. I realized I'd stopped seeing the humanity in the men I hunted. They'd become targets, not people. He met her gaze directly. After Jamie, I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be the kind of lawman who only saw the badge and the gun, not the lives behind the crimes. Olivia considered his words, understanding now the depth of the man before her. So you decided to build rather than destroy. To grow things instead of hunting men. A small smile touched Isaac's lips. Something like that, though I admit the dream seems far away at the moment. We'll reach Montana, Olivia said with conviction, and you'll have your homestead. Isaac raised an eyebrow. What about your uncle in Virginia City? Olivia hesitated, realizing she had spoken without thinking. I don't know, she admitted. So much has changed in such a short time. The life I was traveling toward feels distant now, like someone else's path. Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, hope, perhaps, or possibility, but he merely nodded and returned his attention to the fire. Get some rest, Olivia. Tomorrow will be a long day. Though her mind was filled with unasked questions and unspoken thoughts, Olivia surrendered to her exhaustion, falling asleep to the gentle sounds of the wilderness and Isaac's reassuring presence nearby. The next day dawned bright and clear, the autumn air crisp with the promise of approaching winter. They broke camp early and continued northward, following game trails and less traveled paths as Isaac had planned. He rode with increased confidence, his strength clearly returning, though Olivia insisted on regular stops to check his wound and ensure he didn't overexert himself. By mid-afternoon, they reached the small trading post Isaac had identified on the map, little more than a rough cabin with attached stables, situated at a natural crossroads where several trails converged. The proprietor, a grizzled old trapper named Hansen, greeted them with gruff hospitality. Not many travelers this time of year, he observed, eyeing them with curiosity as he provided fresh water for Samson. Most folks heading north do it before the first snows threaten. We're on a somewhat accelerated schedule, Isaac replied diplomatically, exchanging a meaningful look with Olivia. Hansen nodded knowingly. Running from something or towards something? Both, I suppose, Olivia answered before Isaac could respond. The old trapper chuckled. Honest answer. I like that. He gestured toward the cabin. Got fresh coffee on if you've a mind to warm yourselves before continuing. They accepted his invitation gratefully, savoring the strong, hot coffee and the chance to rest in relative safety. Hansen proved to be a wealth of information about the terrain ahead, marking additional water sources and potential sheltered campsites on Isaac's map. Mining camps seen better days, he warned as they prepared to depart. Gold played out 2 seasons back. Mostly just hard men and harder liquor left now. Might be best to skirt around rather than pass through. We'll keep that in mind, Isaac assured him, offering payment for his assistance. Hansen waved away the money. Keep it. News is currency out here and you brought plenty. At their questioning looks, he elaborated. Riders came through yesterday asking after a couple matching your description. Offered good money for information. Olivia felt a chill despite the afternoon warmth. The Reeves gang. Didn't give names, but they had the look of men who kill for sport, not necessity. Hansen spat into the dirt. Told him I hadn't seen hide nor hair of anyone in a fortnight. Don't much care for men who hunt other men for profit. Thank you, Isaac said earnestly, extending his hand to the trapper. You may have saved our lives. Hansen clasped his hand firmly. Just evening the scales a bit. World's got enough cruelty without adding to it. He glanced at Olivia. Take care of each other. Trail ahead gets rough before it gets easier. They departed with renewed wariness, pushing onward until twilight made further travel dangerous. That night, they camped in a rocky alcove Hansen had recommended, providing natural shelter and a defensible position if needed. As they shared a simple meal, Olivia noticed Isaac studying her with an intensity that made her both self-conscious and curious. "Is something wrong?" she finally asked. Isaac seemed to hesitate before responding. "I've been thinking about what happens when we reach Montana," he said carefully. "About what you said last night." Olivia's heart quickened inexplicably. "What about it?" "You said we'll reach Montana," he reminded her. "Not you'll reach Montana. It made me wonder if your plans have changed." "I'm not sure I have plans anymore," Olivia admitted, finding it easier to stare into the fire than meet his gaze. "Everything I thought I knew about my future disappeared when my father died. My uncle in Virginia City is a stranger to me, my father's half-brother whom I've never met. He offered shelter out of family obligation, not affection. What would you choose if the choice were entirely yours?" Isaac asked quietly. Olivia considered the question, surprised by the clarity of her answer. "I'd want to continue what my father started," she said with growing confidence. "Not necessarily a school, but education in some form. Books, ideas, learning, bringing those things to places where they're scarce but needed." She finally looked up at him. "I want to build something meaningful as you do." Something shifted in Isaac's expression, a softening, a decision reached. "Montana Territory needs teachers as much as it needs farmers," he said carefully. "Perhaps more so." Olivia's breath caught at the implication behind his words. "Isaac, I'm not asking for promises," he interjected quickly. "God knows, we've known each other barely a week, under circumstances no one would choose. But," he paused, seeming to gather his thoughts, "but I find myself unable to imagine continuing northward without you, and that's not something I expected to feel again." The simple honesty of his declaration touched something deep within Olivia's heart. Before she could respond, however, the distant sound of hoofbeats froze them both in place. Isaac was on his feet instantly, hand on his revolver, eyes scanning the darkened landscape beyond their small fire. "Douse the fire," he whispered urgently. "Quickly." Olivia complied immediately, throwing dirt on the flames until only the faintest glow of embers remained. They stood motionless in the sudden darkness, listening as the hoofbeats grew closer, then veered away, following a parallel path to their location. "Patrol," Isaac murmured, his body still tense with alertness. "Could be innocent travelers, but we can't take that chance," Olivia finished for him, already gathering their essential supplies. They spent a tense night huddled in the darkened alcove, speaking only in whispers and taking turns maintaining watch. By unspoken agreement, their earlier conversation was set aside, the immediate danger taking precedence over personal revelations. Dawn brought no further signs of the nighttime riders, but a new caution to their movements. They traveled more slowly, stopping frequently to listen and observe, choosing even more obscure paths than before. By mid-afternoon, they approached the vicinity of the mining camp Hansen had warned them about. From a ridge overlooking the small settlement, they could see that the trappers' assessment had been accurate. The camp had clearly seen more prosperous days. Abandoned claims dotted the hillsides, and many of the structures showed signs of neglect. Still, activity centered around a large tent serving as a saloon, where rough-looking men gathered despite the early hour. "We'll go around," Isaac decided, studying the scene with narrowed eyes. "Add a few hours to our journey, but safer than passing through." Olivia agreed without hesitation, having no desire to navigate a failing mining camp populated primarily by desperate men and cheap whiskey. They began the circuitous route, Isaac had plotted, following a deer trail that curved wide around the eastern edge of the settlement. They had nearly completed their detour when disaster struck. A loose stone turned under Samson's hoof on a steep section of trail, causing the horse to stumble and nearly fall. Though Isaac managed to keep them mounted, the saddlebag containing their food and water supplies went tumbling down the hillside, bursting open on the rocks below. "Damn it," Isaac muttered as they carefully dismounted to assess the damage. Most of their provisions were scattered across the rocky slope, much of it ruined or irretrievable. "What do we do now?" Olivia asked, surveying the loss with dismay. "We're still at least 2 days from the territorial border." Isaac considered their options, his expression grim. "We have enough water for tonight if we're careful, but we'll need to resupply." He glanced toward the mining camp, just visible in the distance. "Looks like we'll be visiting the settlement after all." They salvaged what they could of their supplies, then cautiously approached the mining camp from the east, hoping to attract minimal attention. The settlement consisted of perhaps 24 structures arranged haphazardly around what had once been the main claim. Most appeared to be simple shacks or tents, with only a few proper wooden buildings: the assay office, a general store, and what appeared to be a combination saloon and boarding house. "Wait here with Samson," Isaac instructed as they paused at the edge of the camp. "I'll get what we need and return as quickly as possible." "No," Olivia objected immediately. "We stay together. If the Reeves gang has been through here, being alone makes either of us more vulnerable." Isaac looked as though he wanted to argue but ultimately nodded in agreement. "Stay close then, and let me do the talking. Places like this can be unpredictable." They entered the settlement leading Samson, immediately drawing curious and not entirely friendly stares from the men loitering outside the saloon tent. Olivia kept her head high but stayed close to Isaac's side, acutely aware of their vulnerability. The general store was little more than a large tent with rough wooden shelving, manned by a corpulent man with a permanently suspicious expression. He eyed them warily as they entered, his gaze lingering on Isaac's bandaged shoulder and Olivia's trail-worn appearance. "Don't get many new faces these days," he commented as Isaac requested basic provisions. "Camp's all but played out." "Just passing through," Isaac replied neutrally, counting out coins from their dwindling funds. "Heading north." The storekeeper's eyes narrowed with interest. "North, Montana way?" When Isaac merely nodded, the man continued conversationally. "Had some fellows in here yesterday asking about northbound travelers. Seemed mighty interested in a wounded man and a woman traveling together." Olivia felt Isaac tense beside her, though his expression remained carefully neutral. "Is that so?" Offered good money for information, too. The storekeeper's gaze was calculating now. Said the pair they were looking for had stolen something valuable, family heirloom supposedly. "Interesting story," Isaac said evenly, placing an additional coin on the counter. "We're just simple folks heading to claim land under the Homestead Act. Nothing valuable about us." The storekeeper pocketed the extra coin with practiced smoothness. "Course you are. Simple folks." He began gathering the requested supplies. "Those men, though they didn't strike me as the forgiving type. Said they'd be back through tomorrow, checking if anyone matching that description had passed by." "Appreciate the information," Isaac said, his casual tone belied by the tension in his shoulders. "We'll keep an eye out for trouble on the trail." They completed their transaction quickly and left the store, both acutely aware of the eyes following their departure. Outside, the atmosphere of the camp seemed to have shifted subtly. Men who had been lounging idly now watched them with predatory interest. "They know who we are," Olivia murmured as they made their way toward the edge of the settlement, trying to maintain an unhurried pace despite the urge to flee. "Or they suspect," Isaac agreed grimly. "And suspicion plus the promise of reward is a dangerous combination in a place like this." They had nearly reached the northern boundary of the camp when a large man stepped into their path, flanked by two equally rough-looking companions. All three wore the dust and hardened expressions of miners who had seen better days. "Leaving so soon?" the leader inquired, his tone falsely congenial. "Camp ain't much, but we do like to show hospitality to visitors." Isaac's posture shifted subtly, preparing for trouble while maintaining an outward appearance of calm. "Appreciate the thought, friend, but we've got a long journey ahead. Need to make miles before nightfall." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Thing is, your description matches a pair some fellows are mighty interested in finding. Said there'd be good money for anyone who detained you until they returned." "You're mistaken," Isaac said firmly, his hand drifting casually toward his revolver. "We're just homesteaders heading north." "Maybe so," the miner acknowledged with a shrug. "But $50 is $50, and this camp ain't exactly flush with opportunities these days." He gestured to his companions, who began to spread out, blocking any easy escape. "So why don't you two just come along peaceful-like? If those fellows were wrong, no harm done, right?" Olivia felt cold fear settling in her stomach as she realized they were surrounded. More men had appeared from various points around the settlement, drawn by the prospect of conflict or reward. Isaac's wounded shoulder would put him at a severe disadvantage in any physical confrontation, and they were outnumbered at least 6-1. Just as the situation seemed poised to erupt into violence, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Mullins." All eyes turned toward the newcomer, a tall, silver-haired man emerging from the assay office. Despite his advanced years, he carried himself with unmistakable authority, and the miners visibly hesitated at his intervention. "This ain't your business, Judge," the leader Mullins protested, though with noticeably less confidence than before. "When you threaten travelers in what remains of my camp, it becomes my business." The older man approached steadily, his keen gaze assessing Isaac and Olivia before returning to Mullins. "Since when do we hold people against their will based on the word of strangers?" "Those men said these two are thieves," Mullins persisted, "offering good money to hold them until they return. And you believed them without question because of the promise of coin." The contempt in the older man's voice was palpable. "Have you forgotten everything that once made this a decent place to live and work?" A murmur passed through the gathered crowd, some looking uncomfortable under the judge's rebuke. Mullins shifted his weight, clearly reconsidering his position. The silver-haired man turned to Isaac and Olivia. "I'm Elijah Harmon, former territorial judge, current owner of what's left of the Golden Creek Mining Company." His shrewd eyes took in Isaac's wounded shoulder and their trail-worn appearance. "Whatever your story is, I suspect these men who seek you mean you harm rather than justice." Isaac met the judge's gaze directly. "Yes, sir, they do. We've committed no crime. They hunt us for personal vengeance, not law." Judge Harmon nodded, seeming to reach a decision. "Then I suggest you continue your journey with all possible haste. Mullins and his friends may be temporarily dissuaded, but greed has a way of overwhelming conscience in desperate times." He turned to address the gathered miners. "These people are under my protection until they depart. Anyone who interferes will answer to me, and to whatever law remains in this God-forsaken place." The authority in his voice was enough to disperse most of the onlookers, though Mullins and his closest companions retreated with obvious reluctance and muttered threats. "Thank you," Olivia said fervently once the immediate danger had passed. You took a considerable risk on behalf of strangers. Justice doesn't cease to matter simply because civilization wanes, young lady, Harmon replied with a small smile. Besides, I've encountered the men who seek you or men very like them. They carried the stench of cruelty that no amount of coin can disguise. The Reeves gang, Isaac confirmed quietly. Recognition flashed in the judge's eyes. I presided over cases involving that family some years ago when the courts still functioned properly in these parts. He glanced around the nearly empty camp, then lowered his voice. Come, you can rest at my cabin briefly before continuing. It's safer than lingering in the open, and I suspect you have need of respite. They followed Harmon to a modest but well-maintained cabin at the northern edge of the settlement. Once inside, the judge offered them coffee and a chance to collect themselves while he kept watch from the window. Frank Reeves will return tomorrow, according to what I overheard, Harmon informed them as they prepared to depart an hour later. He's traveling with 3 men, all armed and determined. Even with my influence, I cannot guarantee your safety once they arrive. We understand, Isaac said, accepting a packet of additional provisions the judge insisted they take. Your intervention today was more than we had any right to expect. Harmon waved away his thanks. In my years on the bench, I developed a sense for the character of those who appeared before me. You two are running from danger, not justice. His gaze softened as it fell on Olivia. The Montana border is still a hard day's ride from here, but there's an abandoned trapper's cabin about halfway. Good place to rest before the final push. He marked its location on Isaac's map with precise movements. As they prepared to mount up, the judge drew Isaac aside briefly, speaking in tones too low for Olivia to hear. Whatever was said caused Isaac to nod solemnly before clasping the older man's hand in farewell. They departed the mining camp by the northern trail, pushing Samson to a pace that balanced speed with endurance. Neither spoke much as they rode, the encounter at the settlement having underscored the precariousness of their situation and the narrowing window for escape. It was nearing dusk when they reached the trapper's cabin Harmon had indicated. The structure was small but solid, nestled in a stand of pines with a small stream nearby, an ideal location for a brief respite before the final leg of their journey. We'll rest here tonight, Isaac decided, helping Olivia dismount before seeing to Samson's needs. Tomorrow we make for the territorial border. Once we cross into Montana, the Reeves gang should abandon the chase. Too many warrants waiting for them there. Should? Olivia questioned, noting his careful choice of words. Isaac's expression was somber as he joined her at the cabin entrance. Frank Reeves has pursued us beyond what reason or profit would dictate. His hatred has become personal because of you capturing his brother. Partly, Isaac acknowledged, pushing open the cabin door and checking the interior before allowing Olivia to enter. But I suspect there's more to it than that. Judge Harmon mentioned that Frank was particularly insistent about finding you, not just me. Olivia frowned in confusion. But that makes no sense. I never encountered the Reeves gang before they attacked the stagecoach. I'm nothing to them, just an unfortunate witness they foolishly left alive. Perhaps, Isaac said, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely convinced. Or perhaps there's something we're missing. The cabin's interior was dusty but otherwise sound, with basic furnishings including a small table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed frame covered with an ancient straw mattress. Isaac set about creating a small fire in the stone hearth, while Olivia arranged their supplies and prepared a simple meal from the provisions Judge Harmon had provided. As they ate by firelight, the events of the day and the constant tension of their journey began to take their toll. Olivia found herself struggling to keep her eyes open, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. "You should rest," Isaac said gently, noticing her fatigue. "Take the bed, I'll keep watch." "Your shoulder needs rest too," Olivia protested, though weakly. "It's healing well," he assured her. "Doc Williams did good work, and you've been an excellent nurse. I can manage a night watch." Too tired to argue further, Olivia settled onto the mattress, wrapped in one of the blankets from their supplies. The straw was prickly even through the blanket, but to her weary body it felt like the finest feather bed. "Isaac," she murmured, already half asleep, "you never finished what you were saying earlier, about Montana." There was a pause before he responded, his voice soft in the dim cabin. "It can wait until we're safely across the border. Sleep now, Olivia." Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive as Olivia's mind churned with all that had occurred and all that remained uncertain. She watched through half-lidded eyes as Isaac moved quietly about the cabin, checking the windows and door, ensuring their security before settling into one of the chairs with his revolver across his lap. In the flickering firelight, his profile was strong and contemplative, his expression revealing a depth of thought usually guarded from view. Olivia was struck, not for the first time, by how completely this man had upended her carefully ordered existence and how little she regretted the upheaval. When she finally drifted into sleep, it was with the comforting awareness of Isaac's protective presence and the growing certainty that her future path, whatever it might be, would be irrevocably intertwined with his. Olivia woke to gray dawn light filtering through the cabin's single window and the realization that she had slept through the night undisturbed. Isaac sat in the same chair, his posture alert despite the long vigil, his eyes immediately finding hers as she stirred. "You didn't wake me for my turn at watch," she observed, sitting up and smoothing her tangled hair. "You needed the rest," he replied simply, "and I needed the quiet to think." There was something different in his demeanor this morning, a focused intensity, a decision reached. Olivia sensed that whatever had occupied his thoughts during the night hours was significant to them both. "What conclusions did your thinking yield?" she asked, rising and folding the blanket with methodical movements. Isaac set aside his revolver and stood, crossing to where she stood beside the narrow bed. "Several," he said, his voice low and earnest. "The most important being that I can no longer pretend that what I feel for you is merely concern for a woman I happen to rescue." Olivia's hand stilled on the blanket, her heart suddenly racing. "Isaac, please let me finish," he requested gently. "I've never been a man of many words, and these are difficult enough to say once." He took a deep breath, his blue eyes holding hers steadily. "I know it's been barely more than a week since I found you chained to that wagon. I know that under normal circumstances, people take time to know one another, to build something slowly. But these aren't normal circumstances, and I find myself unwilling to risk losing you without having spoken the truth." He reached out, taking her hands in his with a gentleness that belied their strength. "Olivia Jensen, somewhere between cutting you loose from those chains and now, I've fallen in love with you. Not just your beauty, though you're the most beautiful woman I've ever known, but your courage, your intelligence, your resilience. The way you've faced every challenge without surrender. The person you are beneath all the hardships we've endured." Olivia felt tears gathering in her eyes, emotion welling up so powerfully she could barely speak. "Isaac." The sound of approaching horses shattered the moment, multiple riders approaching the cabin at speed. Isaac's reaction was instantaneous, his body shifting from tenderness to alertness in a heartbeat. "Get your things," he ordered, moving to the window and peering cautiously through a gap in the shutters. "4 riders heavily armed. Has to be the Reeves gang." Olivia's blood ran cold as she quickly gathered their essential belongings. "How did they find us so quickly, Mullins?" Isaac growled, checking his revolver with practiced efficiency. "Judge Harmon feared he might betray us for the reward despite his warnings. Looks like greed won out." "What do we do?" Olivia asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "We're trapped." Isaac's expression was grim but determined as he handed her his spare revolver. "Do you know how to use this?" Olivia nodded, remembering her father's insistence that she learn basic firearms handling before their western journey. "Yes, though I've never fired at a person." "Pray you don't have to start today," Isaac replied, moving to check the cabin's rear window. "There's a path behind the cabin that leads up into the hills. If I can create a diversion, you might be able to escape that way with Samson." "No," Olivia said firmly, understanding immediately what he was suggesting. "I won't leave you to face them alone. We stay together or not at all." Before Isaac could argue, a voice called from outside, cold, confident, and laced with malice. "Vance, we know you're in there. Send out the woman and we might let you live." Isaac's jaw tightened, his eyes meeting Olivia's in silent communication. "Frank Reeves," he confirmed quietly. "And he's lying. He means to kill us both." "Vance," the voice called again, "don't make this harder than it needs to be. The woman doesn't have to die today." Olivia moved to Isaac's side, peering carefully through the window. 4 men were positioned strategically around the cabin's front approach, hardened outlaws with the cold eyes of men who killed without remorse. The leader, distinguishable by his more elaborate attire and commanding posture, could only be Frank Reeves himself. "Why is he so fixated on me?" Olivia whispered. "I'm nothing to him, just a witness." Isaac's expression changed suddenly, realization dawning in his eyes. "Unless you're not just a witness," he said slowly. "Unless there's something more." He turned to her, urgency in his voice. "Olivia, did your father leave you anything?" "Something valuable, perhaps, that the Reeves gang might want." Confusion wrinkled her brow. "No, nothing beyond his books and personal effects. We lost most of our possessions when he fell ill in Salt Lake City." She paused, a memory stirring. "Although—" "What is it?" Isaac prompted. "Before he died, he gave me his watch, a family heirloom." Olivia's hand moved to the small pocket sewn into her borrowed dress, where the timepiece rested. "He made me promise to keep it safe until I reached my uncle. Said it was more valuable than it appeared." Isaac's eyes widened. "Let me see it." Olivia withdrew the watch, a handsome but seemingly unremarkable gold timepiece with her family's initials engraved on the case. She handed it to Isaac, who examined it with intense scrutiny before attempting to open the back casing. After a moment of careful manipulation, the false back of the watch popped open, revealing a small folded paper hidden within. Isaac unfolded it gently, revealing what appeared to be a hand-drawn map. "Your father was carrying this," he breathed, understanding dawning in his eyes. "This is why the Reeves gang attacked your stagecoach, not for robbery for this." "What is it?" Olivia asked, staring at the cryptic markings on the paper. "A map to the lost Washburn claim," Isaac explained quickly. "One of the richest gold strikes in Nevada history. The original prospector was murdered before he could file a proper claim, and the location died with him, or so everyone thought." He looked up at Olivia with newfound understanding. "Somehow your father got hold of this map. The Reeves gang must have learned he possessed it and targeted your stagecoach specifically." "But how would they know?" Olivia questioned, struggling to process this revelation. "Your uncle," Isaac suggested grimly. "You said he was expecting you and your father. If he's connected to the Reeves gang, he could have told them when to expect us on the stagecoach," Olivia finished, horror dawning as the pieces fell into place. "My father's own brother betrayed him." "Half-brother," Isaac reminded her, "and greed has turned stronger bonds than that." Before they could discuss it further, a warning shot splintered the window frame inches from their heads. "Time's up, Vance," Frank Reeves shouted. "Send her out now or we burn you both out." Isaac's mind worked rapidly, assessing their limited options. "The territorial border is less than half a day's ride north of here. If we can break through their line, we might still outrun them." "How?" Olivia asked, clutching the watch and map tightly. "They have us surrounded." Isaac moved to the rear window, studying the terrain beyond. "There's a small ravine about 50 yards behind the cabin. If we can reach it, it offers cover all the way to the ridge." He turned to her, his expression resolute. "I'm going to create a distraction out front. When you hear the shooting start, take Samson and ride for that ravine. I'll meet you there." "Isaac, no, trust me," he said, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that silenced her objections. "I didn't find you just to lose you now." Before she could respond, he brushed his lips against hers in a brief, fierce kiss, their first and possibly their last. The unexpected tenderness of it stole Olivia's breath, leaving her momentarily speechless. "Be ready," Isaac instructed, moving toward the front of the cabin with determined strides. "When you hear me engage them, count to 20, then go out the back." Without waiting for her agreement, he positioned himself beside the front door, revolver ready. Taking a deep breath, he called out to their besiegers, "Reeves, let's talk this through like reasonable men." "Nothing to talk about, Vance," came the immediate reply. "The woman has something that belongs to me. Hand her over and you can ride away." "I don't think so, Frank," Isaac shouted back. "I know about the Washburn claim map. I know you killed her father for it." There was a momentary silence from outside, confirmation enough of Isaac's suspicion. "Then you know why I can't let either of you leave alive," Reeves finally responded, his voice harder now. "That gold is mine, Vance. I've hunted for that map for 5 years. "Well, you'll have to keep hunting," Isaac taunted, winking at Olivia to indicate he was about to make his move. "Because neither the map nor the woman is yours for the taking." With that, he threw open the front door and fired rapidly at the nearest of Reeves' men, catching the outlaw by surprise and dropping him where he stood. The other gang members returned fire immediately, bullets splintering the door frame as Isaac ducked back inside. Olivia counted to 20 as instructed, then slipped out the rear door, leading Samson as quietly as possible toward the ravine Isaac had indicated. Behind her, the gunfight intensified, Isaac firing from different windows of the cabin to give the impression of multiple defenders. She had nearly reached the ravine when she heard a shout of pain that she instantly recognized as Isaac's voice. Turning back in alarm, she saw flames beginning to lick at one corner of the cabin. Reeves had made good on his threat to burn them out. For a moment, Olivia was paralyzed with indecision. Then, securing the watch and map safely in her pocket, she made her choice. She wouldn't abandon Isaac to die alone. She had run with him from the beginning. She would face whatever came next at his side. Tying Samson securely to a nearby tree, Olivia crept back toward the cabin, using the undergrowth for cover. The outlaw's attention was fixed on the burning structure, giving her the opportunity to approach unseen from the side. She was within 20 yards of the cabin when the rear door burst open and Isaac emerged, firing behind him as he ran. He was alive, but clearly wounded again. Blood stained his left side where a bullet had found its mark. Frank Reeves and his remaining men were so focused on the cabin that they didn't immediately notice Isaac's escape. Olivia seized the momentary advantage, raising the revolver Isaac had given her and firing 2 shots in rapid succession toward the outlaws. Her aim was poor, but the unexpected attack from a new direction created the diversion Isaac needed. He spotted her immediately, changing course to rendezvous with her position. Together, they retreated toward the ravine, Olivia supporting Isaac as his strength flagged from the new wound. "You were supposed to be halfway to the ridge by now," he gasped as they reached Samson and struggled to mount. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Olivia retorted, helping him onto the saddle before climbing up behind him. "With you." They spurred Samson toward the ravine just as the outlaws realized their quarry had escaped the burning cabin. Shouts and gunfire followed them, but the natural depression of the land soon provided cover as they rode hard for the northern ridge. Isaac remained conscious through sheer force of will, directing their escape through terrain he somehow knew despite his weakened state. They rode without stopping for hours, the sound of pursuit eventually fading behind them as they navigated increasingly rugged country. By mid-afternoon, they crested a high ridge and Isaac finally allowed them to pause. "There," he said, pointing to the valley below, "Montana territory. Just beyond that river is the border." Olivia could have wept with relief at the sight. "We're going to make it," she whispered, her arms tightening around Isaac's waist. "Yes," he agreed, though his voice was weak and his body trembled with the effort of remaining upright. Together, they continued their descent toward the valley, the border and safety tantalizingly close. Samson, sensing the urgency of their situation, pushed on valiantly despite his exhaustion. They were less than a mile from the river marking the territorial boundary when disaster struck. Frank Reeves and one remaining gang member appeared on a parallel ridge, having apparently circled ahead to cut them off. "There they are," Reeves shouted, spurring his horse down the slope to intercept them. "Don't let them reach the river." Isaac urged Samson to greater speed, but the faithful horse was near his limit after the grueling journey. The outlaws, with fresher mounts, began to close the distance rapidly. "Olivia," Isaac said, his voice steady despite the dire situation, "take the watch and map. If we get separated, ride for the border. Don't stop for anything." "I told you before," she replied firmly. "We stay together." The first shots from their pursuers fell short, kicking up dirt several yards behind them. Isaac drew his revolver and returned fire over his shoulder, the effort clearly costing him as pain from his wound intensified. They reached the floor of the valley with Reeves less than 100 yards behind them. The river gleamed ahead, shallow enough to cross at this point, but wide enough to make them vulnerable during the crossing. "Go," Isaac urged Samson, guiding the exhausted horse into the water. "Just a little further, old friend." They were halfway across when Reeves reached the riverbank and took careful aim. His shot struck Isaac in the back, sending him pitching forward over Samson's neck. Only Olivia's quick reaction prevented him from falling into the rushing water. "Isaac!" she cried, struggling to keep him in the saddle while maintaining their forward momentum. "Keep going," he gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. "Almost there." With desperate strength, Olivia guided Samson up the far bank of the river, supporting Isaac's limp form as best she could. Behind them, Reeves and his companion plunged into the water in pursuit, the outlaw leader's face contorted with rage as his quarry neared escape. They had just cleared the riverbank when the thunder of hoofbeats approached from the north, a mounted patrol of 6 men, wearing the unmistakable appearance of Montana Territory lawmen. The leader, a stern-faced man with a captain's insignia, raised his hand to halt his men as he assessed the situation unfolding before him. "Help," Olivia called desperately. "Please, we're being pursued by murderers." The captain's gaze shifted to the river, where Reeves and his companion had frozen mid-crossing at the sight of the patrol. Recognition flashed in the lawman's eyes. "Frank Reeves," he identified coldly. "You're a long way from your usual hunting grounds." Reeves hesitated, clearly calculating his odds against the 6 armed patrolmen. With a curse, he wheeled his horse around, abandoning the pursuit and galloping back toward the Nevada side with his remaining man close behind. "Let them go," the captain ordered as several of his men raised their rifles. "They know better than to cross into our jurisdiction." He turned his attention to Olivia and the gravely wounded Isaac. "I'm Captain Daniels, Montana Territorial Rangers. You folks appear to be in some trouble." "Please," Olivia begged, struggling to keep Isaac in the saddle. "He's been shot. He needs a doctor immediately." Daniels gestured to 2 of his men, who quickly moved to assist. They gently lifted Isaac from Samson's back, laying him on a blanket spread hastily on the ground. One of the rangers, apparently having some medical knowledge, examined the wound with grave concern. "It's bad, Captain," he reported. "Bullets lodged near his spine. He needs more help than I can give him." "Our post is 3 miles north," Daniels decided. "We have a surgeon there." He looked at Olivia, his expression softening slightly at the sight of her distress. "Can you ride, Miss Jensen? Olivia Jensen, and yes, I can ride." She knelt beside Isaac, whose eyes flickered open at the sound of her voice. "We're safe now," she told him softly. "We've crossed into Montana. The Rangers are taking us to their post where a doctor can help you." A faint smile touched Isaac's bloodless lips. "Told you we'd make it," he whispered before unconsciousness claimed him once more. The journey to the ranger post was a blur of anxiety for Olivia. The Rangers fashioned a travois to transport Isaac as gently as possible, but each jolt of the improvised stretcher sent fresh blood seeping through his bandages. Captain Daniels rode beside Olivia, his gruff exterior softening somewhat as she explained their harrowing journey north and Isaac's role in saving her life. "Vance was one of the best deputy marshals Nevada Territory ever had," Daniels commented. "Never understood why he turned in his badge. Man had a gift for tracking outlaws. He wanted to build something rather than destroy," Olivia explained, her eyes never leaving the travois carrying Isaac. "He was coming to Montana to claim land under the Homestead Act." Daniels nodded thoughtfully. "Good land still available in these parts for those willing to work it." He studied her with increased interest. "And you, Miss Jensen, what brings you north with a former lawman?" Olivia considered the question, realizing that the answer had evolved throughout their journey together. "Originally, necessity," she admitted. "Then choice." The ranger post turned out to be a substantial outpost, several wooden buildings arranged around a central parade ground with a small but well-equipped infirmary. Dr. Elliott, the post surgeon, took charge of Isaac immediately, his experienced hands moving with practiced efficiency as he assessed the severity of the wound. "He's lost a significant amount of blood," the doctor informed Olivia after his initial examination, "and the bullet is in a dangerous position. I need to operate immediately." "Will he survive?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Elliott's eyes were kind but honest. "I can make no promises, Miss Jensen. The next few hours will determine his fate. He's young and strong, which weighs in his favor, but the injury is severe." Olivia nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "May I stay with him?" "During the surgery, no," the doctor replied firmly. "Afterward, yes. Mrs. Tanner, the post commander's wife, has prepared a room for you where you can rest and clean up. I'll send word as soon as the operation is complete." Though reluctant to leave Isaac's side, Olivia recognized the wisdom in the doctor's instructions. She bent to place a gentle kiss on Isaac's forehead, before allowing herself to be led away by Mrs. Tanner. a motherly woman whose compassionate demeanor reminded Olivia painfully of Mrs. Porter back in Riverton. The next few hours were among the longest of Olivia's life. After washing away the dirt and blood of their journey and changing into clean clothes provided by Mrs. Tanner, she found herself unable to rest despite her exhaustion. Instead, she paced the small guest room, alternating between desperate prayer and recitation of her father's favorite poems, anything to keep her mind from imagining the worst. When a knock finally came at her door, Olivia's heart nearly stopped. She opened it to find Dr. Elliot, his surgical apron removed but fatigue evident in the lines of his face. "He's alive," the doctor said without preamble, correctly interpreting the question in Olivia's eyes. "I've removed the bullet and repaired what damage I could. The next 24 hours will be critical." "Can I see him?" Olivia asked, already reaching for her shawl. "Briefly," Dr. Elliot cautioned. "He's unconscious and likely to remain so through the night. You need rest yourself, Miss Jensen. You'll be no help to him if you collapse from exhaustion." Olivia followed the doctor to the infirmary, where Isaac lay utterly still on a narrow bed. His face was as pale as the sheets beneath him, his breathing shallow but regular. Bandages wrapped his torso, a small spot of red visible where the bullet had entered his back. "Oh, Isaac," she whispered, taking his limp hand in hers and pressing it to her cheek. "You kept your promise. You got us to Montana. Now you must keep fighting." She maintained her vigil beside him until Mrs. Tanner gently but firmly insisted she return to her room for rest. Only then did Olivia realize how completely drained she was, not just physically, but emotionally. The cumulative effect of all they had endured since that night in the Nevada desert when Isaac had cut her free from the wagon wheel crashed over her like a wave. Sleep claimed her almost instantly upon reaching her bed, pulling her into a deep, dreamless rest that her body desperately needed. She woke to bright morning light and the disorienting sensation of safety after so many days of constant danger. For a moment, panic gripped her as she struggled to remember where she was and what had happened. Then memory flooded back: the ranger post, Isaac's surgery, the uncertain prognosis. Dressing quickly, Olivia hurried to the infirmary, her heart in her throat. She found Dr. Elliot checking Isaac's bandages, a cautiously optimistic expression on his face. "His fever is lower than I expected," the doctor informed her as she approached, "and his breathing has strengthened overnight. Both good signs." "Then he'll recover?" Olivia asked, hope blossoming in her chest. Dr. Elliot's smile was guarded but genuine. "If he continues this way, yes. Your Mr. Vance appears to be remarkably resilient. Most men would not have survived such a journey with injuries like his." "He's a very determined man," Olivia said softly, taking her place at Isaac's bedside. "So I gather," the doctor replied with a knowing glance between them. "I'll leave you with him. Call if there's any change." Throughout the day, Olivia maintained her watch, speaking softly to Isaac even though he remained unconscious, reading to him from books Mrs. Tanner provided, and bathing his face with cool water when fever temporarily spiked. Captain Daniels visited briefly, informing her that patrols had confirmed the Reeves gang had retreated well back into Nevada territory. "They won't risk crossing the border," he assured her. "Too many warrants waiting for them here. You're safe now, both of you." As evening approached, Olivia was reading aloud from a volume of Emerson's essays when she felt a slight pressure on her hand. Looking up from the book, she found Isaac's blue eyes open and focused on her face. "Olivia," he whispered, his voice weak but clear. Joy surged through her as she set aside the book, leaning closer to him. "I'm here," she assured him, her free hand gently stroking his hair. "We made it, Isaac. We're in Montana territory. The Rangers found us just after we crossed the river." "Reeves?" he asked, concern creasing his brow. "Gone," she told him firmly. "Captain Daniels says they won't dare cross the border. We're safe." Relief visibly washed over Isaac's features, followed by a grimace of pain as he attempted to shift position. "Don't try to move," Olivia cautioned. "Dr. Elliot removed the bullet from your back, but the wound is serious. You need time to heal." Isaac's eyes held hers, a question in their blue depths. "The watch, the map, safe," she assured him, patting her pocket where the items rested. "Though I'm not sure what to do with them now." "Your decision," Isaac said simply. "It's your father's legacy." Olivia considered this, an idea forming in her mind. Perhaps it could be a different kind of legacy than he originally intended, she mused. The beginnings of something new. Isaac's lips curved in a weak smile. "A school." He guessed, remembering their earlier conversations. "Perhaps," Olivia acknowledged with an answering smile. "Though I find myself increasingly drawn to the idea of a homestead as well, a place where both could exist." Understanding dawned in Isaac's eyes, followed by a hope so tangible it nearly took Olivia's breath away. "You're staying in Montana," he said softly, a statement rather than a question. "Yes," she confirmed, her hand tightening around his. "If a certain homesteader still wants me to run with him." Isaac's gaze never left hers as he gathered strength to speak the words that had been interrupted by the Reeves gang's attack on the trapper's cabin. "Olivia Jensen," he said, each word measured and sincere. "I love you. I want to build a life with you, a home, a future, whatever we can create together." Tears of joy sprang to Olivia's eyes as she leaned down to press her lips gently against his. "I love you too, Isaac Vance," she whispered against his mouth. "More than I thought possible in so short a time. You've shown me what courage truly means, what love can be. I want nothing more than to run with you for the rest of our lives." Their kiss deepened, a promise exchanged that needed no further words. When they finally parted, Isaac's eyes shone with both love and amusement. "Not the courtship I would have planned," he remarked wryly. "Gunfights and desperate escapes aren't typically recommended for wooing a lady." Olivia laughed, the sound bright and unreserved for the first time since their meeting. "Perhaps not typical," she agreed, "but undeniably effective. After all, one gets to know a person rather quickly when fleeing for one's life together." Dr. Elliot, returning to check on his patient, found them thus laughing softly together, hands intertwined, the shadow of their ordeal already beginning to recede in the light of newfound happiness. "Well," he observed with satisfaction, "laughter is often the best medicine. I see my patient is in good hands, Miss Jensen." "The best, doctor," Isaac confirmed, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "The very best." The weeks that followed were a time of healing and planning. Isaac's recovery, while slow, progressed steadily under Dr. Elliot's care and Olivia's devoted attention. Captain Daniels, impressed by their story and mindful of Isaac's former service as a lawman, offered assistance in locating suitable land for their homestead claim. "There's a parcel about 20 miles north of here," he informed them one afternoon as Isaac, now able to sit up and move about with caution, studied maps of the territory. "Good water, fertile soil, close enough to the settlement at Clearwater for supplies but with enough privacy for peace." The land, when they finally rode out to see it, exceeded their expectations. Situated in a sheltered valley with a clear stream running through it, the plot offered everything they could hope for: meadows for crops, forests for timber and game, and breathtaking vistas that stretched to distant mountains. "It's perfect," Olivia declared, standing beside Isaac as they surveyed what would become their home. "I can already see it, the house there near those pines, gardens behind it, perhaps a small schoolhouse eventually for local children." Isaac slipped his arm around her waist, drawing her close. Though still thinner than before his injury, his strength was returning daily. "Whatever you envision, we'll build it together," he promised, "one step at a time." With the proceeds from selling information about the Washburn claim to a legitimate mining company, a decision Olivia made in honor of her father's belief in ethical enterprise, they purchased materials and hired help to begin construction of their home before winter set in. The cabin was modest but sound, with ample space for their needs and room to expand as their dreams grew. Word of the new homesteaders spread through the scattered community. Neighbors, though distant by Eastern standards, rode out to introduce themselves and offer assistance in true frontier fashion. Among them was the local minister, who, upon learning of their unusual courtship and deep commitment, offered to perform their wedding ceremony as soon as their home was completed. By early December, with snow beginning to dust the Montana landscape, the cabin was finished enough for habitation. Furnished simply but comfortably with items acquired from Clearwater and handcrafted by Isaac during his recovery, it transformed quickly from a structure into a home under Olivia's careful attention. On the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, they were married in their new home, surrounded by the rangers who had rescued them, neighbors who had welcomed them, and the future they had fought so hard to secure. Olivia wore a simple dress of deep blue that matched Isaac's eyes, with her father's watch chain refashioned into a bracelet around her wrist, a tangible connection to the past that had led her to this new beginning. "I never expected to find love in the wilderness," she told Isaac as they stood before the minister, her hands clasped in his. "But you cut me free from more than just those chains that night. You showed me a strength I didn't know I possessed, a courage I hadn't yet discovered. You taught me to run toward life rather than away from loss." Isaac, resplendent in new clothes that couldn't disguise the capable strength of his frame or the depth of emotion in his eyes, responded with equal sincerity. "You saved me too, Olivia. From a solitary existence, from the ghosts of my past. You reminded me that building something meaningful requires more than just hands and determination, it requires heart. You are my heart, my home, my future." Their vows, spoken before witnesses but meant for each other alone, sealed a bond forged in adversity and tempered by love. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that rose from their assembled friends seemed to warm the winter night itself. Later, after their guests had departed and they stood alone in their new home, Isaac drew Olivia into his arms, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "If someone had told me 6 months ago that I would find you chained to a wagon in the Nevada desert, fall in love while fleeing outlaws, and build a home with you in Montana territory," he murmured against her hair, "I would have questioned their sanity." Olivia laughed, the sound filling their cabin with joy. "And yet here we are," she replied, her hands resting against his chest where his heart beat strong and steady. "Proof that sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to exactly where we're meant to be." "I love you, Olivia Vance," Isaac whispered, still savoring the sound of her new name. "And I love you, Isaac Vance," she responded, rising on tiptoes to meet his kiss. "Always." As snow fell softly outside their window and firelight bathed their home in golden warmth, Olivia and Isaac embraced the future they had risked everything to claim. Their story, which had begun with chains and desperate flight, had transformed into one of freedom and belonging, a testament to the power of courage, the strength of love, and the enduring promise of new beginnings in the vast, wild heart of America's frontier. Spring arrived in Montana territory with a burst of renewal that mirrored the flourishing life Olivia and Isaac had created together. The harsh winter had tested their resilience, but strengthened their bond as they weathered storms, conserved supplies, and spent long evenings planning for the future beside their hearth. With the thawing ground, Isaac set to work preparing fields for their first crops: wheat and corn, potatoes and beans, the foundations of self-sufficiency in their new life. Olivia established a kitchen garden near the cabin, planting the seeds Mrs. Porter had given her as a parting gift, and began assembling a small library with books ordered from as far away as Denver and San Francisco. Word of the educated Easterner who had settled in the valley spread through the scattered homesteads of the region. By summer, children began appearing at their door, first just one or two, curious and shy, then half a dozen regularly. Eager for the stories and lessons Olivia offered beneath the great oak tree behind their cabin. "Looks like your school has begun without a proper building," Isaac observed one afternoon, pausing in his field work to watch his wife surrounded by attentive young faces. The sight filled him with quiet pride and confirmed what he had known since their first meeting. Olivia Jensen Vance was a force of nature, capable of creating light wherever she went. "The best classrooms have no walls," she replied with a smile, quoting her father's philosophy. "Though I wouldn't object to a proper structure before winter returns." True to his word, Isaac began construction of a small schoolhouse that autumn, aided by neighboring homesteaders who recognized the value of education for their children. By the following spring, as their first anniversary approached, the single-room school was completed, standing proudly a short distance from their expanding homestead. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. Droughts tested their farming skills. Harsh winters isolated them for weeks at a time, and occasional disputes with less scrupulous newcomers to the territory reminded Isaac that his skills as a former lawman remained relevant. Yet through it all, the foundation they had built, both literally in their growing homestead and figuratively in their unwavering commitment to each other, sustained them. In their third year on the homestead, Olivia gave birth to a daughter they named Eleanor Grace, after both their mothers. Isaac's tender care during Olivia's pregnancy and his obvious adoration of their child revealed yet another dimension to the man who had once believed his life would be solitary. "She has your eyes," Olivia observed as they stood over their daughter's cradle one evening, watching the infant sleep. "And your determination. God help us both if that's true," Isaac chuckled, his arm around Olivia's waist. "But I see your spirit in her, that light that drew me to you from the first." 2 years later, a son joined their family, Thomas James Vance, named for Olivia's father and the young outlaw whose death had changed the course of Isaac's life. The symmetry seemed fitting to them both, an acknowledgement that even painful chapters in their histories had led them to this place of fulfillment. As their children grew, so did their homestead. The original cabin expanded to include additional rooms. The school flourished with Olivia's dedicated teaching, and Isaac's agricultural innovations made their farm one of the most productive in the county. They became fixtures in the growing community of Clearwater, respected not only for their material success, but for their integrity, generosity, and the living example they provided of what courage and commitment could achieve on the frontier. On the 10th anniversary of the day, Isaac had found Olivia chained to that wagon in the Nevada desert. They stood together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in riotous profusion. The homestead had matured into a prosperous farm. The school now served over 20 students from surrounding properties, and their lives had settled into a rhythm that, while never without challenges, brought deep satisfaction. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked, his arm around Olivia's shoulders as they savored the moment. Choosing this life instead of returning to your uncle and the civilization you were raised in. Olivia looked up at him, the years having only enhanced her beauty in his eyes. Not for a single moment, she replied with absolute certainty. This was always where I was meant to be, even if I didn't know it until you cut those chains and said those 3 words. Run with me, Isaac recalled softly, the memory still vivid after a decade. The best invitation I ever received, Olivia said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him with the same passion that had sustained them through all the years of building their life together. And one I'll never stop accepting. As the sun set over the Montana landscape, they both now called home. Olivia and Isaac Vance embraced the future that stretched before them, a future built on the foundation of that desperate flight across the wilderness, that leap of faith into the unknown, that transformative journey from chains to freedom. Their story, begun in danger and uncertainty, had blossomed into a legacy of love, courage, and the enduring power of 2 hearts running together toward a shared horizon.